All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Books on Tap Live. Today, we're talking to authors Liz Fenton and Lisa Steinke for an event sponsored by Amazon Publishing. This is about their very exciting new book, How to Save a Life. Liz and Lisa have written a number of different books together, and I'm pretty excited to get to talk to them today. Although I guess I just didn't introduce myself. I should do that. Hi, I'm John Marr. I'm Publishers Weekly's news editor, and I don't do this on camera thing very often. Otherwise, I probably would have introduced myself. Lisa, Liz, hello.
Hi.
How are y'all doing today?
Good.
Great.
So, for those of you tuning in, we're doing this live across country via the lovely internet. I am in Brooklyn, about 5 miles from the Publishers Weekly headquarters, which I have not seen in 5 months, 4 months, 5 months. And Liz and Lisa, y'all are in San Diego, right?
Right.
How is it out there today?
It's beautiful. What is it, Lisa? Is it like 75?
Yeah, 75. Blue sky, 75 every day.
And I live on the East Coast. I really don't know why. Amazing that I don't know why I even asked that question. Isn't it always 75 and sunny in San Diego?
Pretty much. Sorry.
Rub it in.
If it hits 58 degrees, that's when we pull out the parkas and the beanies.
And my family lives. I have some family in San Francisco, and obviously very different weather, but a similar exact same degrees all the time. And every time they come to New York, they kind of blink at me. They're like, "What is happening here? Why is it either 94 degrees and 100% humidity, or 20 degrees and hail? Like, why do you live here?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Brooklyn's amazing, though. Brooklyn's awesome.
Hey, it has its moments, and I love it very much. But San Diego is the place today, not only because that's where you're from, but that's because it is where your book is set. And that, unlike Brooklyn, is what we're here to talk about. So let's get to it. Before we get to the book, though, let's talk about you two. So this is your 7th novel together, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I can barely sit in a room with my brothers for more than an hour. So I don't know how. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I love them. 30 years of friendship, right? You've been friends for 30 years? Okay. First of all, what's your secret?
Oh my gosh. Lots of therapy. No, I'm just kidding. We've known each other a long time. So we do not write in the same room. You mentioned not being in the same room. I think that's probably our secret, is that we have our own spaces where we work on our parts of the book, and then we come together. Because we did try writing in the same room once, and it didn't go very well.
No.
What happened? Do tell.
Well, I think we're both kind of we're both type A personalities, and we both like to control things. So I think when we're in the same room, I think we each just need to give the other person space to create. Because I think it's easier to nitpick or feel pressure when someone is in the same room as you. And so if you give you that space, it's much easier to be more objective when you're editing or taking edits.
That makes sense to me. And obviously, novel writing is typically not a collaborative process. So when you decide to take I went into journalism because I love to work with people, but I also am good at writing, and I couldn't imagine sitting on my own for hours upon end, staring at a white wall. So, writing one thing. So I find, the arrangement that the two of you have kind of appealing. But if you're not, say, setting up shop at the same coffee shop. Remember when we could set up at coffee shops?
Yeah, that was fun.
Those were the days.
I know, and indeed they were. But so let's say you're not setting up shop at the same coffee shop. You're working in separate spaces. How do you keep the rhythm going at moments where you're thinking, oh, we have to get this thing done, but we're doing it alone?
We're on the phone a lot. I mean, and with COVID, we actually started FaceTiming for the first time, if you can believe that, in our over decade-long writing relationship. We had never FaceTime until COVID. So that is very helpful. And definitely I recommend to anybody that's going to be an author duo, because we enjoy, if we get stuck, you can just call the other person up. It's like they're right there. And so for us, we do like the, being able to be on our own and have that creative process alone, but then we like coming together too.
Which is kind of nice because it lets you, and this appeals very much to the Libra in me, strike some kind of balance.
Right.
I'm a Libra too. So I totally get that.
You
but,
too.
Yeah.
Two
but,
type A Libras on one call. I don't know how
we might not make it. But the thing is we have a structure in how we write together. And I think that is what makes it easy. I mean, I'll write a chapter, I send it to her, she edits it, sends it back to me, and then she starts the next chapter. So a lot of it is in the process. So it really feels like you're just in it with the other person, even if you're not sitting in the same room.
Sure. And did you have to kind of, like you said, there was, I think Lisa said this, that, you just started for the first time doing video chats. So it sounds like, while some aspects of writing this book were probably business as usual, there are certain things going on in the world at the very least that maybe kind of changed the way your formula worked this time. Did you have to make a lot of changes to your how you work together, or did you feel like it kind of worked out okay?
It worked out okay. In fact, all the changes were positive, with the exception of not being able to meet at that coffee shop, right? But it worked out fine. I mean, for me, I'm at home. I write in my office usually, unless I'm meeting with Liz somewhere. So not a lot changed on my end. I don't know what Liz would say to that, but I think if anything, our process improved with more communication over the phone.
Right. I mean, I would agree with that. And I do like to get out and be in a coffee shop, but I also love my office, and it's a really great space. So I was fine either way. And I was actually the one that never wanted to FaceTime. So Lisa, I think, was so happy because she finally got me to FaceTime. I would refuse. You get a hold of the phone. It's just a whole
You've
situation.
been married forever. You never even FaceTime with your husband in like a million years either.
No,
which is amazing to me.
I know what he looks like. What's his face?
I'll see you when I'm home.
It's fine.
So here's the question: is it better now? Are you more comfortable FaceTiming now, or are you hitting Zoom fatigue like the rest of America?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're new to the FaceTiming thing. So do you like it better? Or?
I do. I actually FaceTimed you. I initiated a FaceTime the other day, which was a big deal. But yeah, I mean, we do have a little bit of Zoom fatigue. Just we do a interview series with our local independent bookstore, Warwick. So a couple times a week, we interview other authors through them. So we have been Zooming our butts off. Like we've had a lot of Zoom, but I do think it's a great way for authors to reach people right now. And it's also nice because we usually tour big cities, and this way, like, anyone can show up, even if they're in a different country, can show up to a talk. And so, I have a love-hate relationship with Zoom right now, I think.
I think that's fair. I certainly understand that. And, I didn't know that you did a series at Warwick's. Y'all are doing so much, and I want to talk a little bit about all the things you do. But first, I want to talk about your book, because we haven't quite gotten there yet, and I want to get into the meat of it. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you came up with the idea for the book, and then let's talk about the central plot device. So for those of you who haven't read this book, How to Save a Life, oh my God, there's like 9 of these on screen. So How to Save a Life, that's branding. How to Save a Life. The central plot device is sort of a Groundhog Day-like time loop, which is really cool to read in a lot of ways. And I'm really curious about not only how the two of you came up with the idea, but whether that presented challenges as well in terms of the structure of the novel, how you outlined, how the characters developed over a repeating cycle of a single day. All those things I'd really be curious to hear about from your perspective.
We were on vacation together in Grand Cayman, and I think we were in the pool. Yes, we were, with drinks, and not unlike right now. And we were talking about what our next book was going to be, and we knew we wanted to do, something with maybe some magical element to it. And we tossed around like Groundhog Day came up, but we weren't really sure. And Liz had just read The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which is about a man who wakes up in a different person's body every day. And so we just started talking about that book, and it led into How to Save a Life. It led into the whole idea of repeating the same day, but how could we do that in a way that didn't feel redundant? And so our challenge was to take every day, and although it's the same day, make it different, if that makes any sense. And we've heard from a lot of readers so far that we've executed that they, initially when you think Groundhog Day, you think, oh, it's going to be the same thing over and over again, but it's really not in this.
It certainly didn't feel like it was to me. And one thing that I thought was a really interesting choice that you made was to make the main character a journalist. Now, obviously, I'm going to love that because it's my job. But I think it was an interesting choice simply because of what journalists' jobs are, which is really to find the truth and unravel it and understand a situation that they may not understand. So one of the things I kind of wanted to talk to you about is how you thought that kind of played in, how Dom, who is the main character of this novel, how Dom's position as a journalist kind of allowed you to write through these days in different ways every time.
Right. So we definitely wanted, when we were imagining Dom, we wanted him to have an interesting job because we wanted, again, as Lisa mentioned, we wanted to make every day interesting and unique. So we wanted to have him have a workplace where a lot of different things would go on, and also having prior knowledge of the day could help him or hinder him. So that's kind of how we chose his job, and it would just be fun. And Lisa has a TV background too, which it's always nice to kind of use that. You don't have to do as much research. Although we did visit a news studio and talked with someone who had Dom's job in a TV studio as we were writing the novel.
Which is great because, like a journalist, like any good journalist, you did your research, and yeah. I think it paid off. Not only in terms of, I mean, maybe it was because of that research, but also I know that the two of you have a relationship with Fox 5 San Diego. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right. So, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that's such an amazing opportunity that we've had with them, and once a month we go on the show and we pick 4 books that we're loving. So it's Liz and Lisa's book club, and we just talk about books. I mean, it's like we're in heaven. It's absolutely been wonderful.
And that kind of gives you a little bit of perspective, I'm assuming, about how things go on, behind the scenes in the world of broadcast news. Did anything, does anything that you've seen on set kind of surprise you? Did anything that you've ever seen on set kind of like make it into the novel?
Well, ironically, we were finished with the book by the time we got the gig with Fox. So that's why we had already, it was kind of funny because we had gone and we had spent some time at KUSI, which actually a rival studio to the one that we work with, and talked to them. And then we got the gig several months later, but we were already done. But I think the people we work with at Fox thought it was funny. They're like, oh, we want to read this. Like, I think they were like reading it thinking like, is this me? Like, Raul, right, who's the host there, he's probably thinking, am I Lance?
It's kind of funny because it's almost like you woke up in your own, version of Groundhog Day.
Mm-hmm.
Wake up in the morning, write a chapter about a book that, write a chapter about a day that keeps repeating. Wake up the next day, write a chapter about a book that keeps repeating. Wake up the next day, get a job at a similar place to the protagonist of my book.
Right.
Talk about serendipity.
Right.
I know, right? Manifest destiny.
Oh God, maybe. Yeah. So tell me a little bit too about how you decided on the plot. So like the plot of this. Well, why don't you talk a little bit to us about the plot, and then tell us how you decided to go with it? Because while I read this book over the weekend, and it's really hard to put down. At the same time, it's a real emotional roller coaster based on the one main thing happening over and over again on this one day that keeps repeating itself. So I'll let you two talk a little bit about that.
Well, How to Save the Life is the story of Dom and Mia. And 10 years prior, they had been engaged, and Dom broke off that engagement. And then he runs into her, and he thinks it's fate. And he asks her out on a date, and she says yes. And when they go out, she dies on that date. And he wakes up the next morning devastated. You know, it's so awful that she's dead. He can't believe it. And then he slowly comes to realize it's the same day again. And so he asks her out on another date, and she says yes, but she dies again. And so it's just really about his journey as he's trying to figure out how to get out of this time loop that he's stuck in. But it's also a personal journey for him as a man, and looking back on how far he's come since he was with her, and then trying to figure out if she really is still the woman for him while he's trying to save her life.
Which is tricky. I mean, it's funny because that, like, trying to answer that question, like, is this the right person for me, is hard enough when you're not watching them die over and over again in front of you.
Right.
I would assume, like, haven't been there, so.
I hope you never have to be in that position.
I hope none of us
That would not be good.
How was it to write that scene over and over again? You know, I know some authors often write out of personal experience, and that is a very, you know, writing a scene like that would probably be very emotional. I know other authors write from sort of a very imaginative perspective, trying to, like, you know, create something that they had never necessarily lived through but would be curious to see play out. How did you come up with this idea? Why did you decide to do it to yourselves and your audience over and over and over again? How did that all come about?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's from a point of imagination, thankfully, that we haven't had to watch someone we love die in a tragic way. But I also think, you know, the first, writing that first scene where she dies, it's very detailed, and it was a little traumatizing, I think, to write. But much like the reader, much like Dom, like, as it goes on and she's dying every day, it's not that he's getting used to it, but he knows he's going to have another chance the next day. So he's more focused on fixing the problem than in saving her. And then when she dies, he's like, okay, I'm going to start the next day. But, you know, we wanted there to be a desperation and an urgency to Dom's character and his arc. And, you know, you're most desperate, someone dying. I mean, there's nothing more traumatizing or make you feel more desperate than that, I would think.
I think that's probably most people's deepest fear, right? Is, you know, the possibility of losing someone you care about and not being able to do anything about it. And that desperation certainly plays out in the book. You see this becoming harder and harder and harder for Dom to bear. But another theme that kind of comes out is this theme of, like, what I thought of as perception and misperception, of who you are, of who those we love are, of how the world works. You know, Dom very frequently comes face to face with versions of reality he never expected to see, both in terms of the people he cares about and in terms of his own life. So I'd be curious to hear about, you know, some of the lessons you think your characters learn about perceiving in this book, and what you hope, you know, audiences will take away from the lessons that they learn as well.
Right. So one of the things that's really interesting about Dom is he completely has romanticized what he and Mia were 10 years ago. And when you talk about perception and misperception, I think that plays a big part of it. And I think that's something I know I have done when I was single, or even in maybe friendships that have gone away, is you really look back and you remember all the good times, but you kind of gloss over that you actually had a lot of problems. So I think that's a big thing that Dom goes through, is realizing, like, maybe I shouldn't have Mia and our relationship up on this pedestal. And he has to go through this process to figure that out. As far as takeaways, I think we would hope people take away, and what we hear a lot, like in Goodreads reviews, is that it makes them want to stop and take a closer look at what they're doing. I think we rush through our lives. And ironically, now with COVID and what's going on in the world, it's kind of forced all of us to take a pause. And I know I was just speeding through my life before this happened. And so I've had to do it as well. But there's secondary characters in the book that Dom actually has to take a beat and kind of look at them for the very first time. And so we hope maybe people take away and say, hey, what am I missing in my day-to-day interaction? Where can I be better? So that's basically it. Lisa, did I hit that?
You nailed it, girl.
Thanks, girl.
I think that's one of the things that I took away from this novel was that obviously that it's worth taking time to go back and revisit and try to understand relationships and moments in your life from a different light. And one of the cool things, although for clarity to readers, nothing about the situation Dom is in is cool. It's really awful. It looks cool at the start, and then it just it gets messy. But I do think there's something really interesting there about sort of a very primal wish that I think humans have, which is like to be able to relive things that they have lived before that now only exist in memory. And it's something that you only get when you are a species that perceives time linearly and can understand that that's what you're doing, that is self-knowledgeable about that perception. And I think that's one thing that I found really interesting in how Dom sort of processed what was going on in this book, is that he kind of realized, like, oh wait, I'm reliving this day over and over again because I didn't get it the first time. Do you
right.
think, were you thinking about, maybe moments in your own life while you were going through writing this book where you felt similarly? Like, were you inspired by anything or other than just like the idea to put him in this position?
I mean, yeah, I think as we're writing him, we were really trying to think, like, as far-fetched as it is, or maybe not, depending on how you view time. But to us, we try to put ourselves like in his shoes, like what would we be doing every day? Because we feel like when we do that, that's when our best work comes out. And so you just put yourself in the character's shoes and think, how am I going to approach this day differently so the outcome isn't the same? And I think, just in regular life, if we were all better about doing that too, because you don't get the chance, like you said, to relive a day, but you do get a chance to be better the next day. And so I think that that's a lot of what we were trying to show through Dom's journey.
And Dom's journey is really the right way to put this, because while there are other characters in this book who absolutely matter to Dom, this book is really about Dom and his processing the situation that he was in. So I'm curious, if you were to write a sequel, and no one is saying you are, but if you were to write a sequel or a standalone novel in like the same kind of universe, which character would you choose? And you were going to choose a different perspective. Which character would you want to give, sort of a similar novel to Dom?
Gosh, I think we'd probably choose Amanda. I think she was a character that in the first draft had a more minor role in the book. And when our publisher took it, our editor suggested, expanding her as a character. And we had a lot of fun writing her. And I think there's a lot more to her. I think she's very, I think there's a lot more depth there to her than we were able to see in How to Save a Life. So I think it would be fun to expand on that in her own book.
So for those of you who haven't finished the book yet, Amanda is this woman who every morning Dom saves. And really that she's almost about to get hit by a bus, a semi, some very large moving object on the road, and just in the nick of time, he grabs her and pulls her out of the way. And he doesn't really know why he knows, but he knows. Like, instinctively, he knows that he has to save her life. And, of course, the book title would imply that maybe that's the life he has to save. But there are so many lives in this book, from Mia's to his own, that he wants to save. So, what is a way that the title of your novel applies to it that kind of surprised you in the end? That you were like, oh, that works for this too. I didn't expect it.
Yeah, it was probably Amanda. I mean, you nailed it there. I mean, like Liz said, she was a much smaller character in the book until we got in the editing phase, and she became much more prominent. And I think we realized, he's saving her life too. And then just beyond her life and Mia's life, it's his life too. I mean, he's not going to die, but he does need to make some drastic changes in his own life. So that came really for us. That's not how we started. We started more with like, what's the plot? What's the premise? But as we start writing our characters, they become, more real and more formed. And so we realized this is all also about him, like saving his own life too. And so I think that was really a surprise to us that we hadn't really thought about when we started.
Does that ever happen to you in other books? Like, a character just, you come up with a character, you think, maybe they're in one scene, maybe two scenes, and suddenly you're like, oh, actually this character is way more prominent than we thought. Is this the first time that's happened to you, or is this something that happens to you on occasion when you're writing?
I think it actually happens every single novel that we write.
Mm-hmm.
The way that our process is, I mean, the way that we outline, it's very loose. So you just, like, if I'm writing chapter 3, I just have whatever I need to accomplish in that chapter. Like, if it's going to the store and getting some bread, let's say, well, I can do it any way I want, or Lisa can. And a lot of times what happens is we introduce secondary characters that we haven't talked about. And I would say in almost every novel, secondary characters have been introduced that we didn't originally plot. Chuck would be an example in How to Save a Life. He's a homeless guy that Dom's running into. That's not something that we plotted out. It just, someone put it in a chapter and we went with it. So we kind of have a habit of doing that. And I often think, and Lisa, I think you would agree, a lot of times those end up being our favorite characters to write. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And a lot of times when we're writing, it's just the characters take on a life of their own. And you hear authors say this, but it really is true. Like, it's not necessarily what you even set out to write that day that ends up on the computer screen. And that's what's really fun about it. Like, when I open Liz's chapter, I have no idea what's coming. And although we've talked loosely about maybe what she'll write, but she can take it in a number of directions. So it's always really fun to open that. And I think maybe it was you that introduced Chuck, and it was like, oh, this is going to be fun. Like, I like this guy. So it gives us like a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun also while writing because of that, because we leave ourselves open to new people coming into the mix and characters doing things we didn't expect.
Chuck is a good example too, because Chuck is a homeless man who Dom ignores for most of his life, and then one day, after one of these many days relived over and over and over again, decides, I have to do something good for this man. And by the end of the novel, you really kind of understand that Dom is starting to realize, oh, the people around me live lives too. Oh, the people around me are suffering too. And the cool thing about that is, it's a very journalistic thing where you kind of are like, oh, I haven't noticed this thing that's happening all the time around me. Oh, why does that happen? How does that happen? What is his story? Is the story connected to other stories? Did you get to feel a little bit like journalists while you were tugging at Chuck's story?
Yeah, I mean, we did, and I had mentioned, Lisa was a talk show producer for several years, and I think, she helped really develop that storyline. Like, what would it look like if Dom, really started showing an interest in this? Like, what would that look like? How would that move forward? What would he do? So that was really helpful. Her experience was very helpful in that regard.
Thank you.
It's experience is a good thing to have in very many fields, and and you all do really, because you're doing so many things. I mean, you're doing this stuff at the bookstore. You're now on TV, and you also have another one of your novels being adapted to TV right now, right?
Yeah, we do, and it's really exciting. It's the year we turn 40, and it's in development with ABC right now. So we're with COVID and everything, everything's going a little slower, but we're really excited to have it hopefully come to fruition.
So before we get into audience questions, why don't you just give us a little teaser about it?
Well, it's based on the year we turn 40, which is about 3 women who on their 50th birthday get an opportunity to go back to the year we turn 40, which is a year that they each made decisions that they deeply regret. Obviously, things don't go as they like. ABC's developing it with the name Happy Birthday Avery Scott. And I think they're making some narrative changes. I think it will be 1 woman rather than 3, but the premise will be the same. If you can go back, and I think she goes back 20 years rather than 10, but if you could go back, what would you change? But more importantly, the narrative question is, should you change?
You two like your what if time travel, huh?
Yeah, we do.
We really do.
We do. Yeah, we do.
I mean, it's a tempting question. It really is. What would we do if we were given a second chance? Which actually brings us very neatly to one of the audience questions that we got before we even started today, from Deborah S., who asks, have either of you ever been given any memorable second chances in your lives?
Ooh, that's a good question.
That is a really at the same thing, or just like
why don't each of you give one example?
I mean, I think for me, and I don't know if this is exactly answering, but the whole, Liz mentioned my TV career, and I kind of just feel like I'm in the second phase now with this author career. And, I loved being a television producer, but it just wasn't super passionate about it, especially toward the end. And so now I feel like I'm getting a second chance at what do I really want to do with my life? Because this is writing is something I'm very passionate about.
Writing, a really good answer to that question, for sure. How about you, Liz?
The first thing that came to mind when you said that, I write full time now, but for almost 20 years, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. And I don't even know if I ever told you this, Lisa, but when I was interviewing, they offered my initial job to someone else other than me. And I actually didn't find out till a year later. And that woman didn't take it. And so they came back and offered it to me. I thought I was the first person. I was actually kind of devastated when I found out. But my point is, I went on to be at that company for almost 20 years, and it really shaped my life. And so it's just interesting. It almost wasn't my chance. And I didn't even know it wasn't almost my chance for a year. So it's just really
I'll have to
interesting.
Ask you later how you found that out. I'll have to.
Oh yeah, it's a good story.
Okay.
That both of you have had some pretty memorable, chances to start again, which is, maybe that informed the book even more than you kind of expected.
Maybe.
Well, probably on some subconscious level, for sure.
I think that does tend to happen. I think, at least in my experience when I'm writing. So we have a lot of other really good questions from audience members. One of them, and I believe you mentioned a book earlier, and I'm absolutely blanking on the name. I think it's 7.5 Lives of Somebody.
Deaths. Yeah. The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle.
All right. So I wanted to repeat the name of that book specifically because the next question I have to ask you is from Teresa S., who asks, oh, nope, wrong question. Let's try that again. Maureen R., who asks, what writers do you read? So that's one answer, but I'd love to hear some more.
There's so many. First comes to mind is Kristen Hanna is a big favorite. Judy Blume has always been a go-to. It's so hard because we have so many author friends and we love all their books. And so I don't know how many more I could actually name. Liz, what were yours?
We love Leanne Moriarty in
Yeah.
suspense. Kimberly Bell is a master in suspense. Catherine McKenzie is great. I just finished a book by Alex Haro called The 10,000 Doors of January. She's a new author to me, and she has a new book coming out this fall. It's kind of like sci-fi, magical. I don't even know what genre it goes in, but it was really amazing. But and Lisa, you should tell them like what your favorite memoir is, because you're a big memoir girl.
Oh my gosh. I love memoirs, and of course I can't think of any of the names at the moment, but I will think, and maybe we can circle back.
How about Smacked? How about Smacked by Elaine Zimmerman? I know you loved that one.
Look at you
I
filling
know.
in for me. You're filling in for me.
My Greyhound is.
Yeah, that was real. Maybe mine is ruining my memory. I don't know, but yeah, that was a really good book. It's about actually how drug addiction can happen within like very affluent families and communities. And this woman was married to her husband, and she had no idea for over a decade that he was hiding a drug addiction. It's really fascinating. Yes, it's called Smacked. And it also has some, San Diego references because she lived here while it was going on.
That sounds like a very heady book, and I'm glad for the recommendation because it sounds pretty amazing.
It is. I love memoirs, I think, because it's just, it's somebody's real life, and I'm so fascinated by that, like being willing to just lay it out there on the page.
It's kind of a very brave act in a lot of ways. I always, generally, I prefer fiction. As a journalist, I probably shouldn't say that. So I'm always really interested when someone takes their life and kind of warps it vaguely into fiction. I will say, though, the Alex Haro, Liz, good choice.
Yeah, have you read that?
I have. I have a friend who works at Orbit Books, which is a science fiction publisher that published that book, and they sent me that book a couple months ago, and it was a pretty fun read.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But we could geek out about books all day. More audience questions. So Teresa S., who I was going to have ask a question last time, but we're bringing her back. What's something unusual you discovered during your research from any of your books, this one or any of your prior 6, but didn't use in that book that you still think about?
I know my answer. I don't know if it's the same as Lisa's.
I don't know. I have to think. So you go.
Ironically, it's research Lisa did, because of the two of us, Lisa is definitely the research person. I don't really care for research. So when we were writing Girls' Night Out, it was our 5th book, and it's about 3 women that go to Tulum, Mexico, and one of them goes missing. And it's told in these 3 narratives. So Lisa did a ton of research just on, and we've been to Mexico a ton. I mean, we grew up in Southern California. I mean, we've been to Mexico more times than we can count. We love Mexico. But she did research on like what happens if, an American or any person goes missing there, like what it really looks like from the family's point of view. And we didn't use all of it. I actually think we only used maybe 1 or 2 facts that she found. And what was interesting is we had gone down by ourselves, just the 2 of us, for a week when we started the book, and we would walk down the dark street by ourselves. And after she did the research about how many people go missing, and once you're missing there, like you're gone, you're not getting any help. It was terrifying.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to the family has to go through a ton of red tape. And as I was reading about this, it was fascinating. So I love research, but I get like lost in the rabbit hole, so I always bring too much and it never all makes it in the book. But that was fascinating to read about, and also pretty sad. It happens much more often than you would think.
Yeah, that is sad. Although I want to counter you there. There's no such thing as too much research.
Okay. Thank you.
No such thing.
Right.
There may be too much research for one thing, but there's no such thing as too much research.
Right.
All right.
Says the person with these bookshelves.
Right.
Like,
Says the journalist, right?
yeah, mildly
Well, thank you.
biased, okay? But I'm on your side.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So Chris S asks, and this is a bit of a heavy question. What would be one day of your life that you would love to play over and over again?
I've got mine.
What is one day that you would not want to ever experience again? And why, for both questions?
I have mine, and they came really easily, so I should probably go because not every answer comes easily. My wedding day, I know that's so like pat, and probably everyone would say that, but I had the best wedding day, and I was a television producer, and so I was worried that I was going to be so worried about like everything coming together, and I just was able to completely step out of it and just enjoy myself. So that was definitely my best day. And I would go back in a heartbeat. Also, because I could wear the very overpriced but yet beautiful dress a second time. So that would be why. And then the worst day that I would never want to relive is probably when my dad died. So that was pretty hard, and I would not want to go through that again at all.
This is going to be really creepy, but those are my two. I would relive my wedding day, which is also very cliche, but it was just a really fun day. And I wasn't a television producer like Lisa, but I am a control freak, and I thought I was going to be horrible on that day and be a bridezilla. But I
never talked about that. I thought I was going to be horrible, and I was amazing.
Yeah, right. You were great. You were great, and I didn't know how you were going to be either, and you were great. But but that I really was able to sit back and enjoy the day, and we had an open bar, and it was just really, we were just in our 20s, and it was just so fun. And then I would say my dad passed away I think 2 years before Lisa's, and so I would probably, we have this weird thing where the same thing happens. So as I knew what you were gonna say, and I'm like, mine are the same. Damn it, mine are the same.
I was like, we always kind of go through it, good or bad. We kind of go through the same things, but
that's
not
partnership
always at the same time, right?
That's partnership. That's
right.
That's
it's helpful because then you have someone to lean on that's already been through it. So very helpful.
That is true. Okay, I have a bit of a dark question here from Kimberly, which we'll use to close this out. Kimberly, with no last name, no last initial, nothing. Simply a 5-word question: is love worth the pain?
Yes. For sure. My God.
Anything in life is a risk, whether it's love or your career or, anything that you really want. There is a lot of risk to it. And maybe that's what makes it so great when you find it or achieve it. So I don't know.
That's a great question, Kimberly with no last name. That is a great question.
It's a great question, but like, whoo, no punches, no punches.
No, it was just there.
The beautiful thing actually, and sorry, Kimberly, it was a very dramatic way to go out. But we actually have time for one last question. So why don't we ask Renee M's question, which is, what's next? What's next for you? What's the next thing you're working on? What can we expect from the two of you next?
Well, we can't. Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
No, go ahead.
You can tell us.
Right.
Well, we can't. It's kind of up in the air. We can't say too much. We will say we just finished a novel that also deals with the question of fate and destiny in a different way, and whether you can control it and whether or not you should. So, but we're not sure what's going on with that. So we can't say more than that.
So that's it. That's all you're gonna get. That's all we're gonna get.
Sorry.
Yeah. Nope, that's okay. It just leaves everyone out there with something else to look forward to. Lisa, thank you so much. This has been terrific. Again, everyone, the book is How to Save a Life, Liz Fenton and Lisa Steinke. Their 7th together, which is truly baffling and amazing to me. I really envy your working partnership. Godspeed. Keep it going.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You.
My pleasure.
It was a
Thank the
pleasure.
two of you for joining us today. So this event was sponsored by Amazon Publishing. Again, the book is How to Save a Life. Liz Fenton, Lisa Steinke. We are signing off now. Thank you for joining us on Books on Tap, Publishers Weekly's fairly new live book event. Please join us on August 19th for our next Books on Tap, a conversation with YA romance novelist Christina Forrest. That event will be sponsored by Macmillan Children's Publishing Group. We got a lot more great Books on Taps coming up, so stay tuned and thank you for joining us today. Bye, everybody.